Hello and welcome to the Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million-Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On the Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Welcome back to the Communicative Leader. I'm your host, Dr. Leah O. If you look back over the lifespan of this season, we've taken quite a journey. We've gone inside the high stakes of NASA mission controls. We've navigated the psychological trenches of the FBI. We've even audited our own egos in the C-suite. We deconstructed failing manufacturing projects and stepped back into the classroom to diagnose a corporate curiosity crisis. When you look at these conversations individually, they really span wildly different domains, right? From technical project management to negotiation theory and tactical execution to deep human psychology. But when we take a step back, when we stitch them together, we have this really fascinating unifying blueprint that kind of emerges. So today, we aren't just looking backward at a list of really great interviews and really incredible leaders. We're pulling out the underlying architecture of modern leadership. We're exploring these macro themes that connect every single one of these conversations. What are these themes? How well we handle friction, how we engineer trust, how we transition from managing kind of mere compliance to nurturing real scalable capability. So if you want a condensed masterclass on what it actually takes to align teams, to protect your culture, to lead with clarity, then settle in. This is our season review, the best of the rest. We're looking at the architecture of modern leadership. So let's start unpacking it. So this first theme we're going to look at is kind of this foundational pillar, radical clarity and execution. And let's start where the rubber meets the road, execution, right? So every leader loves talking about vision, strategy, big picture momentum. But as we learned from our season opener with John Malura, who spent 15 years managing test operations for NASA and elite military units before founding Elite Action Academy, structural project recovery experts like Richard Brew over at True North PMP Consulting, vision without operational clarity, it's just hallucination. We're dreaming. So when we think about John, he brought an incredible perspective from the test stand. He reminded us that when you're operating in high stakes environments where the margin for error is zero, low precision leadership, that is what kills momentum. Now, the biggest traps leaders fall into is giving fuzzy directives, or the opposite, falling into the trap of nano management, taking away employee agency entirely. And what John told us, what he said is, if you want to build a doer, rescue them all the time. If you want to build a leader, let them struggle, coach them along the way, and focus on excellence rather than the myth of perfection. Now, Richard Brew, he echoed this when diagnosing why corporate projects tend to stall out. When initiatives drift, when budgets balloon, when the scope creeps out of control, oftentimes our default reaction is to look for technical failures. But Richard reminded us, oftentimes a troubled project isn't a technical failure. It is usually a communication breakdown. So when we look across these operational conversations, our first major theme becomes crystal clear. Precision requires psychological safety, clear requirements, and proactive communication up, down, and across. If your team is too afraid to tell you that the timeline is unrealistic, or if your stakeholders are operating under a misaligned assumption, no amount of project management software is going to save you. Execution starts the moment you make it safe to tell the truth and have conversations, even the hard ones. So this brings us to kind of our next theme that I pulled out, the relational engine, negotiation, influence, and earn certainty. So once you've built these operational rails that we were just talking about, now you have to look at how we actually interact within the team. So again, now we're thinking about influence. Influence is your everyday currency. Trust is something you can earn, not something you are assigned. This was front and center when we sat down with Derek Chevalier in Negotiation Mindset and MK Palmore in Communicating Earned Certainty. Derek challenged us to completely reframe how we view negotiation. Most of us treat negotiation like a rare, high-stakes event.
something we're only doing when we're buying a house, negotiating a salary. But Derek's, his approach is entirely different. And I love this. He kind of flipped it on its head. Every interaction is a deal in motion. Every time you talk to a direct report, a cross-functional partner, a client, you're navigating underlying constraints, mutual values, and unspoken resistance. If you view negotiation as a zero-sum game where you have to win, you are destroying collaboration. But my friends, if you view it as a diagnostic exercise where your job is to uncover the hidden constraints driving the other person's behavior, everything changes. And how do you anchor that influence when the stakes are at their absolute peak? That's where MK Palomar stepped in, bringing hard-earned lessons from his career in the FBI straight to the corporate boardroom. MK introduced us to the concept of earned certainty. In a crisis, teams don't look for the leader with the loudest voice or the most polished PR statement. They're looking for the leader who has done the invisible preparation required to project genuine stability. You can't fake authority when a cyber crisis hits or a project implodes. That earned certainty comes from that radical preparation, transparent communication, the willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder with your team when you're in the messy middle of it. The takeaway here is powerful. Influence isn't about manipulation or charisma. It's about aligning your credibility with the real-world constraints of the people you lead, right? Wow. Theme 3, what I want to talk about next, what we saw a lot of this season, the internal mirror. So self-awareness and the ego audit. Of course, we can talk about systems, execution, external influence all day, but eventually every leader has to look in the mirror. And brings us to the most uncomfortable and arguably the most important theme of the season. You can't scale high performance culture if your own ego is acting as the primary bottleneck. Oof, tough to hear, tough to think about, but really, really essential if we want to show up as our best self. We tackled this head on with Dr. Ron Camacho in the Ego Audit and expanded on it through our exploration with Michelle Van de Paz in the Legacy of Clarity. Dr. Camacho challenged us to run a literal audit on our defensive behaviors. When your ideas are challenged in a meeting, what is your physiological and psychological response? Are you leaning into curiosity? Or do you kind of circle your wagons to protect your authority? Ron reminded us that leaders who require all the answers inevitably cultivate environments of compliance rather than innovation. Your team stops bringing you problems because they've learned that your ego can't handle the friction of being wrong. Right? And we know that that has waves and consequences that impact the work we do. Michelle Van de Paz, she took that self-awareness outward, showing us how internal clarity translates into external movement. A mission statement hanging on a break room wall, it's not going to change behaviors. Clarity is not a verb, my friends. It requires taking your internal organizational purpose, translating it into this rally cry that gives people genuine ownership. When you combine Ron's ego audit with Michelle's mechanics of clarity, the takeaway was pretty clear. Leadership self-awareness, it's not a soft skill. It is a hard operational prerequisite. If you haven't audited your own need to be the smartest in the room, your team's performance, my friends, you're always going to be hitting that ceiling. And this leads us to the fourth and final theme that emerged across our season, this ultimate shift from compliance to curiosity. The big picture realization that I took away from this season is that every single one of these conversations that ties it all together is a concept we explored with Dr. Katie Trowbridge in the Curiosity Crisis. Katie diagnosed a silent killer that's eroding modern organizations from the inside out. In our relentless pursuit of efficiency, of metrics, and oversight, we've accidentally designed curiosity out of our workplaces. We have built systems that reward employees for keeping their heads down, for following the same playbook, and for not making waves. We're managing behavior, certainly. We're doing that very well, but we're not nurturing thinkers. So let's look at how this connects to everything else that we've talked about today. When project execution fails, it's because people are usually too compliant to surface early friction points. When we fail to establish high precision parameters, we stifle growth by stepping on employee agency. When our negotiations stall, it's because we stopped asking diagnostic questions and we started pushing predetermined answers instead. When a crisis hits, teams panic if they haven't been trained to think critically, and especially how to think critically under pressure. And when our ego takes over, we shut down our dissent. We kill our team's natural desire to explore, to innovate, to ask questions, and to get better. What my takeaway from the season is, so many, right? But management, it really tells people what to do, and leadership teaches people how to think. If we want to build resilient, high engagement organizations, we have to stop trying to solve every problem for our teams. We have to cultivate the institutional courage to ask more thoughtful questions, to embrace structural friction, and build cultures where deep engagement isn't just permitted, it is actually expected. So when we stack these pieces together, when we get this radical operational clarity from John Malura and Richard Brew, and we have our earned certainty from M.K. Palomore, everyday influence from Derek Chevalier, vigorous self-awareness from Dr. Ron Camacho, mission momentum from Michelle Van de Paz, and kind of this fierce protection of human curiosity from Dr. Katie Trowbridge, we get the architecture of a truly communicative leader. We are not driving precision without clear channels, my friends. We're not influencing others without first understanding their constraints. We can't lead outward until we've audited our own ego inward. And we can't sustain growth if we kind of choke out our team's curiosity by over-managing their behavior. So thank you for walking through this architectural blueprint with me today. If this episode resonated with you, share with a peer, leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Visit our website for full transcript and extended resources from these guests. And we look forward to continuing to have these great conversations, these important dialogues on the next season of The Communicative Leader.
All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.